All right, everybody, welcome back. Totally Driven Radio. It's been a hell of a night tonight there, Nick. Oh, Nick's answering the phones. My bad. He's getting our guests ready and lined up as I'm getting our tweets and our posts ready to be lined up. So this is that's funny. Yeah, so this is the big moment of the night. We're going to be giving away a teddy scare while we're talking to the Cryptic Picture guys, Mark and Christian, the two guys behind Cryptic Pictures, and their movie that's coming out, their docu-thriller, Mortal Remains, which I'm very excited about. I really want to see this. It's really interesting. They have a Kickstarter going on. You got to check out the previews for this. I knew nothing of this whole topic or subject, and now I'm hooked. I want to.
Yeah, I know you brought it up like 3 times this week. I know you're really excited about it.
Yeah, dude. Like, first off, I love documentaries. I just love them, and like I said, like I knew nothing about this whole Carl Atticus, Mortal Remains, anything about this dude. And once I saw the first trailer, and they have, I think, 3 different trailers out there, I mean, I was hooked. I want to see this friggin' thing.
I'm going to have to check it out now. That sounds really cool, and I hadn't really looked at it other than when I, caught the synopsis and everything before I emailed it off to you, but you've definitely piqued my interest, bro.
Look at that. All right, let me see.
I didn't know there were multiple trailers and stuff.
Yeah, I think there's like 3 different ones.
That's really cool.
All right, so we're all ready to go?
We are.
All right, let's get them on here. Let's welcome to Totally Driven Radio, Mark Ritchie and Christian, let me see if I get this right, Stavrakis.
You got it.
Look at that.
Yeah, that's
Welcome
great.
to Totally Driven Radio, guys.
Thanks for having us. We really appreciate it.
Now, like I said, I knew nothing about this whole Carl Atticus guy or nothing like that until I watched the trailer, and then I was just hooked. Like, totally sucked in by the whole thing.
It's a pretty compelling legend. Not a lot of people know about Carl Atticus, but once you find out a few things about him, it becomes more and more intriguing, everything you hear. And we certainly got sucked into a lot of adventures because of him. But that's what the movie's about.
How did you guys decide to let's do this? Let's make this documentary about him.
This process, this whole production started long ago. I'm talking over 10 years probably,
wow.
when Chris actually started debating, or Christian started thinking about this tall tale, this urban legend that's out there, this urban legend that is about the film that made its audience go mad. And subsequently, Chris was kind of banging this around in his head and thinking, where did that urban legend kind of have its origins? Where did it start? What's the genesis of that legend? And he subsequently started investigating, and it wasn't too soon after that a film by, I believe it was John Carpenter, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, called Cigarette Burns, which was a fictitious story, obviously, about this urban legend, the film that made its audience go mad. And Chris was even more intrigued after that and said, I've got to find out where this started. Where in the world did this urban legend begin?
I mean, I was writing Mortal Remains long before Cigarette Burns
came on. Okay.
Oh yeah, I don't want people to get the impression that I based the thing on Cigarette Burns, because I was writing about Carl Atticus before that thing aired. But no, it's this legend about the audience being driven mad by a performance or by a movie. That was the origin of the whole thing. And we did some digging. We found a couple of intriguing clues, and so this name Carl Atticus sort of surfaced, and we took this kernel of urban legend and ran with it. And I wrote the whole thing initially as a documentary. In fact, John Carpenter was one of the people I used as a character in my documentary, because I'd written it as, we were talking to horror filmmakers who knew about this guy and were going to, they were explaining how he had influenced them. And then suddenly there have been different iterations of this story over the years. Cigarette Burns was one of them. I thought, well, Jesus, John Carpenter himself directed this. I can't use him as a character anymore. But, we wrote it as a documentary based on this character, and then it sat in a drawer for several years. And then Mark, through a friend of his at Sony Pictures, was trying to pitch some, TV ideas. And this guy said, no, that's really jumping out at me. The horror is really big now because Paranormal Activity at that time had just taken off. He said, do you have any sort of horror-related projects? And Mark said, well, my friend Chris wrote this thing, and he said, tell me about it. And that's, you can tell from there, Mark, what happened.
I gave the worst Hollywood pitch ever. It had been 3 years since I had read Chris's damn script. And I mean, I remember it, but I was, as I was going into Act 3, I remember something that was pinnacle that I needed to mention that happened in Act 1. But this guy was glued to every word coming out of my mouth. Like you, he became very fascinated with this mythical figure, Carl Atticus, and his legendary status, who he was, and he said, you guys got to send me the script, which I contacted Chris immediately, and Chris cleaned it up, and sent it right off to him, and then he got back to us with a few notes, and then we actually contacted somebody who's sort of been down this road before, Ed Sanchez, the director of the Blair Witch Project. Chris and I had actually gone to school with Ed, and Ed had some very interesting input because he, too, was familiar with the legend of Carl Atticus. Only in his studies for the Blair Witch and the mythology and folklore of Maryland, he had sort of come across Carl before. So we were able to pick up some really interesting information from him, and at that point, we figured if we had these two guys interested, we should probably go ahead and create, not only send the script in, but we created a mock trailer, sort of a proof of concept 8-minute trailer, and I put it together with clips from all these different horror films, and I just whipped it together as quickly as I possibly could. We sent it off, and my buddy at Sony showed it to the VP of acquisitions over there, and the guy said, who the hell is this Carl Atticus guy? I've been in the business 50 years. I've never heard of him. And that's kind of when Chris and I looked at each other and said, okay, well, we've got something here. Nobody knows about this guy. You can barely find any information about him on the Internet. And this could be a gold mine for us, and so we kind of took it from there.
Wow. That's crazy. Yeah, like I said, I never heard of him, and I mean, not that I'm that, up on my horror genre, but you would think something like this, I mean, just from seeing the trailer, like there would be more out there about this guy.
Yeah, that's the thing is that, outside of Maryland, nobody's really heard of him. It's just kind of a local legend because he didn't really do a whole lot. He was a young guy. He made 2 movies, and then they weren't received very well. One of them wasn't really screened at all except for a premiere that people freaked out. They rioted. They destroyed the single known print of the film, except for bits and pieces, which surface from time to time. The bits and pieces that did survive are really disturbing, and it's an interesting story. And then he went out and killed himself. So nobody really knows what he was about. There were stories that he was legends and rumors that he was digging up bodies and using them in his movies. I mean, who knows if this stuff is true or not? Chances are it's all bullshit. But it's an intriguing enough story and fascinating enough story that. Why not run with it? My God, I mean, even if there's a hint of truth to it, that's usually enough. I mean, look at Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The first thing it says is this film was based on a true story. Now, you don't know which part of it is true, And it turns out, some of the most disturbing parts of it are true, but it wasn't a chainsaw. It wasn't in Texas. It was Ed Gein, who was doing some really disturbing shit in Wisconsin. But just the fact that it's based on truth or based on reality is enough to turn that switch in your head, and you think, oh, God, this might have really happened somewhere, and maybe I shouldn't be watching this because maybe this is too close to the truth. And that's what fascinates me about the story in general. And so, like I said, I wrote the whole thing as a documentary, front to back, about this character. And the cat at Sony was very intrigued and fascinated, but he said no one's going to sit for a documentary for an hour and a half and walk out of the theater going, that was really interesting. He said you need to have some sort of dramatic through line for the audience to latch onto and follow. And so he said, why don't you add another component? Why don't the two of you go in search of this guy and his movie? And we thought, well, that's interesting. That's kind of like that's a lot closer in execution to what the Blair Witch Project was initially, because I don't know if a lot of people know this, but there was the Blair Witch Project, which the movie itself was just the footage, the found footage. And there was also a program on Sci-Fi Channel called Curse of the Blair Witch, and that was also sort of the backstory, the documentary sequences. And originally, those guys had that was part of the film. It was cut together, so you'd be cutting back and forth from this sort of documentary footage to the footage that was found. And when it was picked up by Artisan, they said, drop all that stuff. We'll use that as promotional material. The movie should just be their footage. And so that's how they sold it. But we went back to that original concept of using, cutting back and forth and using the documentary sequences as exposition of a sort.
Right.
And it worked. It took a lot of tries, but we finally got the pacing worked out and got the found footage component, in a workable form that now you can actually follow the story of these guys going out looking for this film. And the result is pretty close to what we intended or what we aimed at, because again, that wasn't initially what we were trying to make. But we, I think, successfully managed to sort of surgically graft those two genres together, and we ended up with something interesting, I hope.
Now, it seemed like from the clips I've seen, like whenever you bring this guy's name up to people, they seem a little freaked out.
To say the least, yeah. You just mentioned that sci-fi is not your. To answer your question in long form, Bay, you just mentioned that horror is not really your genre, and it's not my genre either. I'm more of a sci-fi action thriller kind of guy, but when I read Chris's script, I was fascinated. And Chris talked about we had kind of created various versions of this film, and our first version was about 50 minutes long, and it had all the information that we could locate on Carl Atticus. And when we sent it into Sony, they basically said, well, you're going to need more. You can't, it's not a feature-length film unless it's at least 84 minutes or something like that. And we said, well, gosh, that's all the information there is on this guy. We can't get anybody else to talk, which was part of our problem during production. Was some people would come forward and speak about it, and others were a bit turned off by the whole idea. And then others would give sometimes we interview folks and we'd get contradictory stories because don't forget, this took place some 40 years ago. This guy was a filmmaker in the late 60s, early 70s.
Right.
And so to get people to not only remember, but to be willing to talk about it was a bit tough. And so in turn, then to sort of come full circle with Chris's comment about, the found footage component, that's why that's there. And it's a bit of the more fabricated part of the film, but that's only because it was tough to get folks to talk about Carl Atticus, because like you said, as mentioned in the trailer, you mentioned this guy's name and, all hell breaks loose. The way the legend goes as far as Maryland is concerned is that his first film was called Culture Shock, and it screened up and down the East Coast in a couple of major cities, Philadelphia being one of them, New York being another. And apparently there was some killings or maimings that took place during the screenings of these midnight shows, and the authorities were never able to kind of figure out who was behind it all. But then you had his second film, Mortal Remains, come out, and that one didn't even make it past one screening before the same thing was sort of occurring. There was this large riot. The authorities were called. It's unclear whether it was the religious right that was kind of accusing this guy of making more than just films, that he was perhaps documenting death. And it was, so people just, a lot of people just were very, very turned off by, I mean, they don't necessarily consider him perhaps a legitimate filmmaker. They were like, that guy's, don't even talk to me about that guy, because what he was up to goes beyond filmmaking. It was it was to the far left of what one might call cinema. And so, yeah, it's tough to get folks to kind of chat about him. And since Chris and I have sort of drudged this up from the depths, I know Chris spends a lot of time online. He's our social media director, and he'll send me stuff that he comes across all the time. Some really fascinating stuff that folks have mentioned Carl here in a newspaper article or a film review or a book review even. We saw his name pop up once. So folks know that it's out there, but it's very tough to get them to admit to it and or talk about it.
And there are still a lot of people who insist the whole thing is a hoax or the whole thing is a rumor and a myth, and they may well be right. But it's just having the name to hang all this on is kind of he's like the cinematic boogeyman of the Maryland film scene, and it's people would spit on the ground if you mentioned his name in certain places. So it's a good jumping off point anyway, for this story.
Hey, we got a question from a caller for me. Let's get her on here.
Oh, cool.
Amber, you're live on Totally Driven Radio. What's your question?
Yes, my question is actually about Carl Atticus, and there is some of us who are still very passionate about the macabre and horror, might I add.
Great.
But actually, I was wondering, is there anything unique or odd surrounding his death, actually, that maybe others might want to know or hear, anything unusual about it?
Yeah, it was a very, very unusual circumstances, at least as far as we could determine that the way it worked out on paper anyway was that Carl, he apparently committed suicide. They found the body. The body was headless when it was found. It had been out in the woods for some time. It was decomposing. It was pretty disgusting. Some hunter stumbled across it, I guess. But they identified it based on a tattoo, because Carl was known to have a big tattoo on his chest. And, there was no way they could get fingerprints. There was no way to identify any dental records because the head was gone. But there was a gun laying nearby, so they assumed this guy went out in the woods and blew his head off with a shotgun. And then, later on, it became apparent that Carl was not the only one who had that tattoo, that he had this sort of retinue of sort of hippies that would hang out with him on the set, and they didn't really help out, apparently. They were just kind of there. His friends of his who just kind of lurked in the corners, and they, I guess they all had the same tattoo. And so, there have been people who have suggested maybe it was one of them, and it wasn't him at all, and maybe he's still around, and it just really, again, it goes off in a lot of creepy directions that we thought, well, Jesus, we can't let this go. We have to take this and run with it, because it's a hell of a story.
I did not know that. That is very interesting.
To sort of piggyback on what Chris just mentioned, I think it should be made clear that there is a lot of suspicion as to why he committed, or if it was him, why he committed suicide. And it should be noted that there are records that the FBI was involved and was very interested in questioning him because of the accusations made, because he killed himself not too long after Mortal Remains aired. That was his second film. And I don't even think, from what we've heard, it didn't make it even through the entire screening before everybody pretty much was up in arms about what they were watching on the screen, which is kind of why Mortal Remains has sort of become this holy grail of horror films. But he was, the question then being, why did he commit suicide? Was the FBI after him? Is the reason why we can't find any copies of this film because what was on there was graphic and perhaps real? Was he covering something up? Perhaps if he was involved in the death of somebody that wasn't him, but was supposedly, thought by the authorities to be him, and then it raises the question: is Carl kind of still out there? Is this guy still alive somewhere, just sort of in hiding, lying low?
Right now.
And he could be listening right now.
That's exactly what I was wondering.
Yeah, Chris and I have different opinions about that. I mean, Chris is kind of in the mindset that no, I think Carl would be dead by now, and I'm in the mindset
maybe he really was just go and went out and offed himself because he had enough of whatever lunacy he was stirring up. But no, who knows? It's again just one more loose thread.
If he is alive, do you think he's pissed that you stole his name on Twitter?
I sure hope not.
Yeah, right.
Well, I'll be part of Mortal Remains too.
Well, Amber, you're winning the bear tonight. You won the teddy scare.
Woo-hoo.
Oh, awesome! Thank you guys. Oh,
so
that's cool.
I'm gonna put you on hold, and Nick's gonna grab your address. Okay?
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Cool. Congratulations.
You guys have a good night.
Thanks for calling.
You too.
Just making sure she's on. Okay, cool. So, did you guys get to interview anybody that was supposedly in his movies?
Well, that's a tricky slope there because we couldn't really find anybody who was in his movies. A lot of people that were apparently in his movies were not seen again, so we didn't want to open that door.
Wow.
We did find a couple of guys who said they worked with him, and they gave us their recollections of working with him, and they even these guys were like, we didn't go to the premiere, we didn't really like being around him at all. And it was just, we did it for the paycheck, and we're glad he's gone, kind of a thing. But we couldn't find anybody who remembered seeing the movie. We couldn't find anybody who was in any of his movies.
Really?
Yeah, it's creepy. He only made 2 movies, and they were made, forget under the radar. They were made off the map. So
any idea of how many people went missing?
How many? I don't know. There are 3 or 4 that we know of. Nobody you ever heard of. It was not even remotely familiar names.
Right.
But yeah, it was in the movie. You see a couple of posters for people that were supposedly in Mortal Remains that didn't turn up again afterwards. And the one guy says, we didn't really want to ask why, because then maybe we wouldn't turn up again.
There was one crew member who we interviewed who said, and I can't remember which one it was, but he talked about, and this actually didn't make it into the film, but he talked about that some of the cast members were actually derelicts, pretty much bums looking for a paycheck.
Right.
They weren't even necessarily actors per se, and so locating those kind of folks is a bit difficult. But I don't recall if we purposely left that out or if it didn't necessarily add to the story. But we definitely know of a few people that we were able to verify were definitely missing after the fact. But he had such a strange entourage on set. Just a real, it was almost Manson-esque, in his grouping, his groupies or whatever you want to call them.
It's right around the same time too that the Manson shit was going on. So it's
yeah, I guess
there was any connection there because they were of course a continent apart, but same sort of milieu. This guy was surrounded by creepy associates, and they just kind of gave off a bad vibe to everyone who encountered them.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. The whole Manson type thing. I kind of had that same feeling too.
Yeah, Yeah, it's very, very definitely, and it's again with the tattoos and everything else. I mean, there were certainly legends and newspaper articles that mentioned this guy might have been part of a cult or a satanic, outfit, and it just, it kind of pushes all those buttons.
Right. Now, it looked like you guys had I guess pictures from when that the riot in the theater. Were those actual pictures from there, or?
Some of it. I mean, again, we had to fabricate a lot of that stuff because we couldn't really find any direct reference to it. So we recreated some of it. Some of the interviews are completely phony because although we heard things about him, we couldn't find anyone to verify it. So we said, well, let's we'll take dramatic license. Again, it's based on a true story. It's not history. So we'll expand on it in a few different directions, and there is a kernel of truth to it. And I'm not going to say which part is the truth yet, but it's it's intriguing.
But you guys were able to get some footage of the movie?
A small clip, a very short 20-second clip, and to be quite honest to you and your listeners, there's no way for us to even verify that we are told that it is a clip from Mortal Remains, but we were never able to confirm officially that it was a part of the print or a press from a print of the actual film.
It was a quick-time video of this short clip of film that was sent to somebody, and they were told that it was a short segment from Mortal Remains. Now, again, we heard that the print was utterly destroyed, but there have been people who said bits and pieces have surfaced, and this is supposed to be one of them. So, it's what that clip depicts is pretty disturbing, pretty gruesome shit. So, can I say something there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, good. So yeah, again, we don't know that it is, but we go on the presumption that it is, and so that's how we use it in our movie.
So even 20 seconds of this presumed clip was pretty intense.
You get a glimpse of it in the trailer if you watch. There's a scene of a guy with a mask. He comes over and starts slashing this guy's face, and it's just, that's all it is. And he cuts the guy's face and then starts pulling at the skin. And you're like, oh my God, it's hard to sit through even that little bit of it, but that's all it is. And who knows what the rest of the film that surrounded that moment was like. If it's anything like that clip, then it must have been pretty intense, and that's presumably why the audience went crazy.
Yeah, I was going to say, what was the point where do you guys know what the point was that made the crowd riot?
We don't know at what point in the film they did, or if I don't know. From what I understand, the film didn't even play all the way through, so it must have been some sequence in the middle of the movie that drove them nuts. And can you imagine by the end what would have happened if they had sat through the whole thing?
Right. Now,
that clip is
you guys
graphic.
Go to the theater? Is that theater still there that it aired in? Do you know, or?
It's an art center now, actually. It's in Baltimore, and it's still in existence, but it's not a film. It's not a cinema anymore.
Okay.
They don't screen films there, I guess. They have dance recitals, and they have an art studio and a bunch of other stuff. So that was a sort of a dead-end lead for us, unfortunately.
And at the time, the press pretty much wrote it off as people freaking out on drugs at a horror movie, and started they didn't call it a riot. I think they called it an altercation or something like that. But people were hurt, and again, they went into the projection booth and apparently ruined the film somehow. But that was the only known print, and so that's you'd think this guy had a negative or something somewhere that you could establish that at least it did exist, but nobody could find it. So maybe he destroyed it himself, or maybe there were no other prints. That was his one master print or something. But who knows? That's our premise, is that we go out looking for another print of the movie, and maybe it's out there somewhere.
Wow. Now you guys already won awards for this movie.
Yeah, we've been very blessed with the film festival scene. We received 3 awards so far and some other accolades in Philadelphia, where we're trying to push this Kickstarter screening. We received at the Terror Film Festival. We received Audience Favorite and Best Editing, and then in another film festival in Atlanta, Georgia, the HorrorQuest Film Festival, we received Best Direction. So the accolades have been coming in. God bless, both of those festivals and the support that they've provided. But not only that, there are others who are finding this film intriguing that aren't even part of the horror scene. We actually got accepted into the official selection of the Three Rivers Film Festival, which is one of the oldest known film festivals in the country. It's in Pittsburgh. And they sort of adopted the film and screened it and were very intrigued by it, primarily for the same reasons that you are. They had never heard of this guy. They thought, this is a film that needs to be seen. We just got a big write-up, actually, in the Toronto Film Scene magazine. We're one of the top 5 must-see films of 2014, must-see film festival films of 2014. Wow. So yeah, every time we kind of get online, we're seeing somebody else kind of waving the Carl flag and spreading the word, spreading the legend, I should say.
Now, you mentioned the Kickstarter that you're doing.
Yeah, we're trying to kick off a sort of I guess you'd call it four-walling the film, which is when producers go out and rent a theater and screen the film sort of themselves. And we're trying to just build a fan base, sort of expose the film before we start talking with potential distributors, just to see what general audience reaction is. We've been lucky enough to get a lot of great reaction at the film festivals and from a variety of other podcasts and interview sources and so forth. But the Kickstarter in Philly is basically designed around a screening with a Q&A that follows. And if you get onto the Kickstarter, and go to their search engine, just type in Mortal Remains, will be the first thing that pops up. If you type in Mortal Remains Philadelphia, it will be the only thing that pops up. And we're hoping that folks will, purchase tickets via Kickstarter. We're also planning a screening sometime in June, probably, in New York City at the Film Anthology Archives. And we're trying to organize things with them up there. We'll probably have more information about that next week or the week after, so you can just check out our website at mortalremainsmovie.com or our production website, which is a production company website, which is crypticpictures.com.
Very cool. Hey, we got another caller here. We got the one and only Michael Julie from HorrorNews.net. Michael, welcome to Totally Driven Radio.
Hey, how you guys doing, man?
Good, man.
Mike. Hey, I'm excited, about these guys and this movie they're pushing. Fingers crossed. We do the Philadelphia screening because. If this goes down, yours truly is going to be the host for the Q&A.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, we're looking
very
forward to
nice
it already.
And I just wanted to call in and show my support, guys.
Right on. We appreciate everything you've done and hooking us up with Bay and a variety of other sources. God bless you, and keep our fingers crossed that in the next week here we'll pick up some fans. So.
Hey, listen, guys. In June, I'm going to be at Atlantic City for the Bizarre AC convention. HorrorNews.net. We have a booth up there. So if while I'm there, if I can do anything to spread the word even further, at the convention, just reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to do that.
Oh, great. Dynamite. We'll be in touch then. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, totally. We'll just, we have these little flyers about, do you remember Carl Atticus? You can pass them out and see if anyone remembers the guy.
Yeah, there you go.
Cool.
Yes.
So,
well, I don't really have a question for you guys, because like I said, I just want to give a call and give some shout outs and
right on.
Just keep on going.
Yeah, bless you. Thanks for all the
Good
Twitter mentions and just everything. You've been great to us. HorrorNews.net, folks. They've been great to us.
Thanks, guys. Listen, I'll let you go, okay?
All right, sounds good, Mike. Be good.
Thanks, Mike.
No problem.
Check out Mike and the rest of the crew over at horrornews.net. So I guess this will be released on DVD as well?
We are, yeah. We're in the process of searching out distributors. And one thing that we're actually holding on to the film for the time being, because we're hoping that we might be able to entice investors, even more so than distributors, investors who are interested in supporting the company, Cryptic Pictures, and who are interested in, even more importantly, in supporting a sequel to this award-winning film. And if we can nab, a few, we're willing to actually do sort of like a cross-collateralization deal where we share in the profits from one if we can help, get number two off the ground. So we are actively seeking distribution, but we have not yet signed anything, and that's one of the reasons why. But we've had a lot of interest, about 4 or 5 different companies that have approached us and said, saw your website, we saw what you guys are up to. We, of course, don't know anything about Carl Atticus, but we'd die to get a copy of the film and sort of see for ourselves. So yeah, we just haven't found the right deal that we're looking for because we're trying to expand the company while also getting a distribution deal signed. So
nice. Now the screening in Philly, when is that supposed to happen?
Supposed to be on April 27th, which is a Sunday night at 5 p.m. at the Ibrahim Theater, and all the details can be accessed on the Philadelphia Kickstarter page for Mortal Remains. And that's the game plan. When Chris and I are planning on being there, doing a Q&A, we're going to bring lots of swag with us to sell for any folks interested in promoting the film at their local office or with their friends and family. And again, we're just trying to build a fan base and spread the legend, let folks know that this guy was out there, and hopefully, in doing so, perhaps come across somebody who knows something we have not yet heard. Again, we had maybe 16 hours of footage, and a 90-minute film came out of that. And so there's a lot that we still have on I'd love to say celluloid, but we filmed it on digital video, and that we plan on using for part 2. But we know that there's got to be somebody else out there that has information about this guy, or even a spin-off of the legend that they could share with us. So we're keeping our fingers crossed that we'll come across something.
How about family members? Were you able to track maybe family members down?
No, we had a hell of a time even finding where he was buried, and then once we got there, we learned that people had been messing with his grave, and so they removed the marker and planted the body somewhere else, so people would just leave the cemetery alone. And they were supposedly there's a family plot that his parents were buried in, but we never did find that either. So again, it was another loose end that we had to sort of patch over in our story.
Wow.
And it goes off in so many directions, this thing.
And that begs the question that I sometimes ask, and that is, I oftentimes wonder if Carl Atticus is simply a name, that it was a pseudonym for another director who was up to no good, and because so many of the leads kind of lead to a dead end, you begin to question why that is the case. Is this guy trying to
sort of like
buried? Literally,
Mr. Alan Smithy.
Yeah, or Cooper. Who was the guy Cooper who mysteriously stole money and the FBI lost track of him, jumped out of an airplane?
D.B. Cooper jumped out of the plane, yeah.
I mean, and still to this day it's a mystery. And that's, I guess that's kind of what makes it so intriguing. When you mentioned family members before, the first thing I thought of was my own family members, not Carl's. And I wanted to mention that I showed my sister-in-law. I don't know if I ever told you this, Chris, but I showed my sister-in-law the 20-second clip, and when it got to the end of it, she stood up and slapped me. She was so horrified that I showed this to her because I know that she doesn't like horror films, and I just wanted to see what her reaction would be because I know what mine was and what the general reaction is to folks who see the film. A friend of mine who was down in Atlanta flew all the way to Atlanta drove all the way to Atlanta to catch the screening there. Left the theater and basically said, I need to go home and take a shower. I mean, the residue that this guy's story kind of leaves on you just want to wash it off. And so, yeah, that clip is graphic. It's very graphic. I mean, I'm afraid almost to show it on YouTube for fear that they'll shut it down. Just literally skins dripping off of this masked figure's hand.
We've seen it so many times ourselves because, over the past 3 years that it took us to put this thing together, we've been cutting it and sending footage back and forth, and we're completely inured to it. But, when you show this trailer to somebody, we don't even think about this, face flashing anymore. But people cover their eyes and they turn away. It's like, oh, God, this is still powerful stuff.
And not only that, but it also is, when it finally settles in, and especially for folks that see it in a cinema setting, at the film festivals, and they watch a clip like that, and they go, okay, wait a minute, this guy was making movies, with practically no budget. Talk about micro budget. He had no budget, and although he did have a funder for his second film, Mortal Remains, but his first film had literally no budget, and this guy is pulling off special effects that good. You begin to understand why so many people were questioning whether or not what he was filming was actually, more of a documentary of what he was doing as opposed to or what he might have been doing, because I don't want to accuse the guy without proper proof, but there's the possibility that, he was up to no good, and your mind goes, there's absolutely no way. I mean, Chris and I are filmmakers, and we watch it and go, how would you pull that off? I mean, Chris has a background in horror film makeup, and he's like, I don't know if there's a prosthetic that can do that. That doesn't look like Caro syrup with red dye, and your mind begins to play on you. You start to go, well, how did he pull it off then? Is in fact what he was doing real? So
we don't want to know.
So, what's next for you guys with Cryptic Pictures after this is all?
Well, after our remake of Jaws takes off, we're going to remake The Godfather, and also. Of course we're working on Mortal Remains 2 naturally, which is the next obvious step. And like Mark said, we're trying to get people interested in investing in a larger and more robust sequel, because again, we put this movie together basically with a micro budget. Mark financed the whole movie himself basically over the course of 3 or 4 years, and we got together what we could. We squeezed as much production value as we could out of every nickel. We squeezed 10 Lincoln pennies out of it, and it's all on the screen. But again, it's still it's rough, it's crude because we partially because that's the format, that's the nature of found footage. The documentary sequences are very well polished and edited, due in no small part to Mark's skill, because again, in over 3 years, cutting stuff and sending it back and forth, we managed to get a routine going. He would say, "What do you think of this?" I'd say, "Tighten it up here, and this looks better." And wow, you really nailed that one. And so long distance filmmaking does work if you have the time to do it.
Right.
It's tight. It's a tight little movie, and we'd really like to expand upon it for the sequel. So we'd like to make a real movie, the next time, and actually take this story even further. But there are other things we're developing too. There's of course a zombie movie and the teen coming of age kind of thing that we're working on paper.
Awesome.
So there's a lot of stuff we'd like to do.
I'm sorry?
I said there's a lot of stuff we'd like to do.
Oh, yeah, and I was going to say we learned all of our skills from the great master George Romero, actually. And I have no idea whatever happened to this. Chris and I were actually cinematographers for him on a television. What was that, a TV pilot?
It was a pilot for I think it was another proof of concept thing that never got off the ground. But, we were just filming stuff for this wrestling video that George was directing as a favor for a friend, and we didn't learn all our skills from George Romero, but I certainly studied his stuff growing up, and all the other stuff that we watched. I mean, I was an avid student of horror films in particular, and movies in general, and that's what you learn is you have to fill the frame. You have to know what you want. I mean, every frame is a composition. It's a painting. So you have to know what you need to see in that frame to make the audience believe what you're trying to tell them. So if you want to see a riot taking place, you don't need to have the building burning and 20 people, leaping out of vehicles and into police cars. What you need is maybe 3 people in the foreground and maybe 2 other people running around in the background and a lot of noise and maybe a flashing light. And suddenly it becomes in your mind a riot,
Nice.
Yeah, it's very tricky. And again, Mark is a fantastic producer too, because I'll say, I as the writer, I'm thinking, okay, I need 3 ninja costumes, 10 swords, and a fake tree. And I'll say, okay, here's 1 costume, 2 swords. Go find 3 people with black pajamas, and we'll make it work. And you work with what you have, and again, because it's impressionistic and because you're cutting together, footage quickly, you can get away with a lot.
Right.
And there's a trick to cutting too, which is that if something doesn't really make sense in your mind makes it make sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Therein lies the crux to the story of Carl too.
Yeah, really. But it's if you shoot like for instance in Blade Runner. You see he's looking at this photograph. He zooms in on the photograph and sees a woman laying in the bed. And then he says, okay, print that right there. And he prints this Polaroid that looks nothing like the picture he was just looking at. And then he goes and finds Joanna Cassidy, who looks nothing like the Polaroid. But, your brain does math. Says, okay, this is the same woman. It's that kind of thing. So if something doesn't exactly match what you saw before, it's okay. Because in some ways that works in your favor. Because there's a part of your brain that says, this is a movie, and, just go with it, and it'll make sense in the end. And hopefully it'll still make sense in the end.
Nice. Well, I'm hoping this takes off. I hope this Philly premiere happens, because I'd like to come and check it out, because I'm really very intrigued by this whole thing. You got me hooked to it.
Nice. Cool. Well, we hope to show it to you.
Cool. So where can everybody go so they can keep up to date on everything? And
yeah, you want to learn more about the film, go to mortalremainsmovie.com. You want to learn more about, you can actually check out our electronic press kit on our EPK is on crypticpictures.com, where you'll be able to find a lot more information about Chris and I and the company itself. And then Chris will go ahead and share, and of course our Kickstarter, which you can just go to Kickstarter.com, and in their search engine type in Mortal Remains Philadelphia if you want to learn more about that. And Chris will take over all of our social media tags.
Of course, we have Twitter feeds at Cryptic Pictures and also at Carl Atticus. So hopefully the real Carl isn't pissed at me for stealing his name. And also, we have Facebook pages for both. You can look us up on there and follow our news. And there may even be some other websites out there, like for instance, carlatticus.com, which is kind of our repository for information on Carl that we've been able to dig up. And I think mortal-remains.com is another one. You might find something interesting there. But check them out at your convenience, and hopefully we can show you the movie soon in Philly and maybe some other places. And
cool.
Just keep following us up, and we'll let you know what's going on.
Awesome. Well, it's been a lot of fun, guys. Like I said, I wish you both a lot of luck, and I hope this happens, and I hope I get to see it next month.
Hey, listen, Dave, thanks for having us on. We really appreciate it, man, and all the support that you and Mike over there at Horror News, because I know he connected us, and we just really appreciate, all of the interviewers, podcasters, bloggers who have been going out of their way to connect with us, and so thank you very, very much.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Like I said,
yeah.
Man, I was instantly hooked and intrigued by this whole thing, so I like it. So you got my approval.
Right on. Well, yeah. If it wasn't for guys like you, then indie film wouldn't be able to advance as it has over the past 10, 15 years. So without your interest, what we're doing doesn't mean a thing. So thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you. All right, guys. Thanks again, and hopefully I'll see you next month.
Sounds like a plan, man.
Cool.
See you in Philly.
There you go. All right, everybody, there they are. The Cryptic Pictures guys, Mark and Christian. MortalRemainsMovie.com. Go there, check it out. Go to Kickstarter.com. Do a search for Mortal Remains Philly and donate, because I want to go see this movie next month, because I'm going to donate. So do it. Do it, do it, do it.